in domestic politics, the president, while powerful, is much less powerful, much more constrained than we often think. But the president's role in world affairs, in foreign policy, is a very different story. In military affairs, it has proved almost impossible to limit the president's actions. The War Powers Resolution, passed by Congress, overriding a presidential veto in 1973, was to limit the ability of the president to deploy American troops without getting congressional approval. In actual practice, though, it's not clear that it's accomplished that. Once a president has deployed American troops to a battle area, and once they have become fired upon, it's almost impossible for Congress to make the president withdraw the troops at that time. The effect on public opinion is, understandably, always to rally behind the troops. A good example, before the U.S. attack on Iraq in 2003, only about half of Americans supported the idea of an invasion. Just 2 months later, almost all Americans thought that the war was justified if weapons of mass destruction were found. And almost 80% of Americans thought that the war was justified whether the weapons were found or not. The difference? American troops had been committed. The war had begun. In almost every international conflict, there's a kind of a rally round the flag effect, and the president's public approval goes way up. One of the authors of our textbook argues that this dynamic, public opinion going up with any international action, going down with any domestic action, that this dynamic influences presidents. It's just a little bit of a push on presidents to go to war. When Barack Obama was running for president, he was very clear in his criticisms of President George W. Bush, saying that congressional approval was needed for the president to commit military troops other than in a situation of an immediate threat. But after Obama was president, he didn't behave in accordance with that principle. In 2011, he ordered a missile attack on Libya without congressional approval. 2 years later, in 2013, although he did ask for congressional approval to attack Syria, he was very clear in saying he didn't actually need it. Obama announced that the United States was bombing Libya. There was virtually no congressional objection or even discussion. It was as if Congress accepted the idea that this was the president's realm of power, the president's business, not theirs. As active and confrontational as Congress has been in limiting the president's power, in checking the president's power in domestic policy, they've been very shy about going against the president and trying to limit his powers in military affairs. A recent attempt by 2 prominent senators to put teeth back in the War Powers Resolution failed completely. There's an important partial exception to this rule. In recent years, the Senate has become more assertive about the terms of treaties negotiated by the executive branch. But that is an exception. So in domestic politics, as we've seen, the president's actions are checked, constrained, and limited by the other branches. But in foreign, especially military policy, I'm free. So am I saying that the presidency is so weak in regards to the other branches that the president is pushed around by Congress and the courts to a degree where it doesn't even matter who we elect president? Of course not. It matters a great deal. What I am saying is that if we expect any president, whoever he or she might be, to solve all our country's problems single-handedly, then we're doomed to disappointment. For this week's discussion, I've asked you, do you agree that we're asking the impossible from our presidents? If so, what should we do? Should we give the president more power in domestic affairs, or should we adjust our expectations? I look forward to hearing and seeing what you've written.